Members of the board and management and staff of PETROTRIN. Do we have anybody at today's meeting that was not at the last hearing? Okay. Well, then, regrettably, I'll have to go through the process again. Could PETROTRIN please introduce itself?
Ranolo Judah Singh, Vice Chairman.
Nigel Edwards, Director.
Anthony Chantag, Director.
Fitzroy Hayward, President.
Selwyn Lashley, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Energy.
Penelope Bradshaw-Niles, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy.
Could we get the people at the back, please? Tell us who you are.
Astor Harris, Vice President of Refining and Marketing.
Okay.
Lalawati Rambaran, Manager Financial Accounting Acting.
Carmen Prasad, Manager Management Accounting.
Sharon Morris Cummings, Corporate Secretary.
Radhika Maraj Singh, Senior Manager Law and Land Management.
Neil Derrick, Vice President, Human Resource and Corporate Services.
Stephen Hour, Vice President, Exploration and Production.
All right. And today in this committee we have Mr. Ramdeen, member, Mr. Lee, member, Mr. Young, Vice Chairman, myself, Mr. Mbert, as Chairman, Mr. Dillon as a member. We will be examining you today. Who would like to go first? Terribly sorry. Did you want to say
something? Sorry, Chairman, just a note for the record that Director Rajpal, who was supposed to be part of our team, is ill and wasn't able to make it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Ramdeen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and the President and the members of PETROTRIN, I want to begin this afternoon by thanking you for the submission of the report dated the 21st of December 2017, as requested by the committee on the last occasion with respect to the Southwest Soldado project. Mr. Chair, I'm directing these questions to you, and if it is not properly directed to you, then perhaps you could just indicate who will answer the questions. And I'm not sure exactly who they ought to be directed to. Do you have in your possession, Mr. Chairman, what is commonly referred to as the Lashley report that was delivered on the 1st of June 2017?
I don't have it in my possession, but I was in fact part of the committee that reported on that occasion.
Mr. Chair, what I want to get at is what is reported at page 13 under the heading of asset integrity. And asset integrity is one of the major problems that PETROTRIN faces at the moment, correct?
That is indeed one of them, yes.
Right. Well, I want to focus a little bit on the asset integrity. Recently, when I say recently, within the past year, there was an issue about an oil spill at PETROTRIN that resulted from a ruptured tank at PETROTRIN. And you must be aware of that and the consequences thereof.
Recently, there was a ruptured tank. I think, may I pass this on to the President?
Yeah.
Yes, member, there was a oil spill that occurred in May 2017.
Right. When I say recently, I'm sorry to make it seem as though it was weeks or days ago. Sure. But there was an oil spill last year with respect to PETROTRIN. And was that, as far as you are aware, as a result of the asset integrity problem that faces PETROTRIN as we speak?
The investigation into the oil spill would have identified a number of factors, one of which had to do with the integrity of the tank, yes.
Okay. Now, there are a number of communities that surround the PETROTRIN Pointe-à-Pitre refinery. Has there ever been any report done by PETROTRIN with respect to what the risks are to those communities as a result of the asset integrity problem that PETROTRIN faces?
As a matter of routine, we do risk assessments of our facilities, which includes the Pointe-à-Pitre facility. And that will, whenever we update the risk assessments, we will take into account any new information that we have with respect to the risk associated with our assets.
Okay.
But part of our obligation to the OSHA authorities is that we continuously update our risk assessment of our facilities.
But what I want to focus on, Mr. Harewood, is the fact that if there is an asset integrity problem, there are two aspects to that. One, it's a risk to the company, and also because of where PETROTRIN is located, it is also there's a wider risk to the community, because asset integrity will come in different. The asset integrity problem comes in different forms. Now, what I'm asking you directly is, has there been any assessment of the risk to the surrounding communities at Pointe-à-Pitre with respect to the asset integrity of PETROTRIN?
So again, I want to repeat that we do risk assessments of our facilities. More than that, you would appreciate that in 2015-16, there was a national facilities audit that also included PETROTRIN and included our facilities throughout our various locations. And that would have looked at the risk of the organization from many different aspects, including impact into the communities.
Okay. Now, at page 13 of the report that was submitted under the heading of asset integrity, it says that it gives the history of what was been spent on PETROTRIN. They said 168 million was spent in 2015 on repairs. In 2016, it was reduced to 100 million, and the budgeted expenditure for fiscal 2017 is expected to significantly increase to $630 million US. How is PETROTRIN going to fund this?
So our approach to our budgeting thus far requires us to budget for our operational expenditure, what we call our OPEX, and also requires us to budget for our capital expenditure and what we call our non-recurrent expenditure. Non-recurrent expenditure interestingly includes a number of asset integrity issues that we would have identified, and those three components make up our funding requirements of the company, which is met from our revenue and from our short-term lendings and borrowings as required.
All right, but this particular figure of $630 million US that is budgeted to be spent in fiscal 2017, how is that going to be funded?
From our raising of funds, our capital program, and our operating expenses. So that is part of our budget. And this, we are not the authors of this document. This came from the committee. But our expectation is that this would have included capital projects as well as non-recurrent operations projects.
But this is under this money, this 630 million. Am I not correct in saying this $630 million that PETROTRIN is going to spend,
yes,
or projects to spend,
yes,
in fiscal 2017, as it says here, is solely on asset integrity?
Well, what will have happened is that we would submit a portfolio of projects to be done for the company for each fiscal year. What we would then do is identify those projects that are related to asset integrity and group them together. And the sum of that is, I assume, what is being covered here in this report.
So Harewood, this figure of $630 million US, is this a realistic figure that PETROTRIN expects to spend on asset integrity in fiscal 2017?
Well, it's a budgeted figure. And it would be the figure that we would.
That's what it says.
Yes,
it's a budgeted figure.
Yes.
So PETROTRIN has.
May I just intervene here?
Sorry.
The year in question, is it a calendar year 2017 or financial year 2017?
I assume that this report said fiscal 2017.
So that would have been finished.
Yes.
You spent already.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we can,
no, I was just listening to Senator Ramdeen, and he was speaking about PETROTRIN's intention to spend this money, but it seems the money already spent.
Can I correct that?
Yeah, go ahead. No.
So, Mr. Harewood, just building upon what the chairman just elicited, how much of this $630 million US was spent? Perhaps the question might not be proper to direct to you, or if it is, or anyone else. How much of the 630 million US has been spent by PetroTrin in fiscal 2017?
And so that was what I thought you would have asked, and basically we can come back to you with a detail of where we have spent our budget so far. But I would say of the estimates that we have so far, we would not have maxed out at this figure for fiscal 2017.
But is there anyone who is here as part of the committee that would be able to assist us better? I'm not asking for the specifics, What I'm asking for is, could someone assist us and tell us, out of the budgeted 630 million, how much has been spent? Was it half, a quarter?
I can't tell you that offhand, member. We can provide that as a subsequent answer.
So here, what you're telling me, there's nobody here from the management who would be able to tell you that?
From our budgeting process, I don't think so. Anybody knows that offhand? The point I'm making to you, Chairman and member, is that our budget includes a number of projects, which will include developmental projects.
No, Mr. Hayward,
reliability projects.
let me clarify my question. Are you saying that based on the members of the management who are present, not the board, because the board just came in. It's not fair to ask members of the board, but I'm asking you as president and members of the management. Nobody here can say roughly how much money was spent on asset integrity in 2017?
So, Chairman, this figure here amongst around just over $3 billion, TT, $4 billion, and I know that we did not spend $4 billion last year.
I'm aware of that.
Capital project.
I know that.
I would prefer that we go back and do the work and give you an answer with the details as to how much out of what was spent we could attribute to asset integrity.
So you are unable to say here today whether
At
you
this point
spent
in time,
1 billion, 2 billion, 500 million.
I would not want to
You
hazard
cannot
a
say.
guess. I would rather we do the collation and provide you with the responses.
Chair, through you to the President. I don't know if this safely say the outgoing President. But if I hear you correctly, and asset integrity is one of the critical areas that PetroTrin has a concern with, even for the well-being of the country. And is it fair to say that this committee cannot even get a response from the PetroTrin team of what was spent on a critical area throughout PetroTrin that impacts the country as far as safety and environmental issues, that they don't even come in here, tell us how much money was spent on asset integrity? Is that a fair question? Is that a comment I'm hearing from the President?
I think that perhaps there might need to be some clarification because I'm not so sure that asset integrity is booked as a line item in the accounting of PetroTrin. You know, this you're talking about constitutes a number of items, some of which are capital expenditure and other things, and I think that maybe it relates to specific items, and those they will probably be able to give you some understanding of where they have spent money in repairs and maintenance or something of that sort that would directly relate to that, but there are other parts of it which become part of it as a capital expenditure. So I think from an accounting point of view, that is going to be a challenge for them to do it unless they go back and do some research on it.
Let me come in, Senator Ramdeen. If we go to page 13 and we look at that same paragraph, PetroTrin told the Lashley Committee that the actual expenditure on asset integrity in fiscal 2015 was 168 TT million, while in fiscal 2016 it reduced to TT 100 million. If PetroTrin was in a position to be able to tell the Lashley Committee that, and then also tell the Lashley Committee that the budgeted expenditure for fiscal 2017 is US 630 million, why it is you can't tell us now what went on? Since you were able to tell the Lashley Committee this. Or let's put it another way. On what basis did PetroTrin tell the Lashley Committee this?
So, Chairman, I think it's unfair to suggest that PETROTRIN told the Lashley Committee this. We appeared in front of the Lashley Committee on many occasions. We have presented different, as a witness, we have presented different aspects of our operation, and the committee would have made the compilation. This number, from where I sit, appears to be a high number and higher than our normal budgetary expenditure, even for all our assets. So that's why I've asked that we go back and compile the information and present it. That's all I'm saying. This is not our report. This is the Lashley Committee's report.
But you see, the difficulty I have with that, Mr. President, is this. As a country, we are here tasked with the burden of trying to find out, which is what the chairman explained on the last occasion. I'm going to get to that, of what do we do with PETROTRIN as a country. And the Lashley Committee was tasked by Cabinet to prepare a report to inform the Cabinet and the country, because the Cabinet is going to make the decisions that govern our country as to what they are going to do. Now, you are saying that you appeared before the Lashley, PETROTRIN, I'm saying, sorry, appeared before the Lashley report. We have a figure here, and the reason why I went to it first is because, like the chairman indicated, from 100 million US to over $4 billion, it is one of two things is happening here. Is either PETROTRIN has not given the Lashley report information that is accurate, which will then mislead the people who have to make the governance decisions in the country, and that is entirely unsatisfactory. And the second point I want to make is this. When we were here on the last occasion, I was very heartened by the statement that Mr. Espinay made about the position PETROTRIN finds itself in. As chairman, I can recall Mr. Espinay saying that he indicated to the board and management that things can't continue to go on like that because PETROTRIN is not run as though it's a private organization. Now, the chairman of this committee is Corporation Sole. It is as though you are reporting to the board and you have come here and we are asking questions about what is happening at PETROTRIN and we can't get answers. And from where I sit, that is entirely unsatisfactory. We have the entire management of PETROTRIN here before us. And we are talking about $4 billion, 630 million US, you have told the Lashley Committee is going to be spent on asset integrity, which is one of the most pressing matters that PETROTRIN has to face with. Well, can I ask straight this question? Is this an accurate figure, or is this accurate information to have been told to the Lashley Committee that from 100 million TT dollars in 2016 fiscal, that PETROTRIN was expected to increase the expenditure on asset integrity to over $4 billion in one financial year?
Chairman, I suspect that this number includes also other things such as the ULSD plant, which is all part, if it was in the first part of that page, that there was as you know, this whole ULSD plant, part of repairing that process might have gone down into that total figure.
Chair, let me ask
So it's
The way I would like to deal with this, since nobody in the management in PETROTRIN can tell us today, and it's unfair to the new board to ask them, I'm not sure we should continue along this line because we will just be in a circular, we'll have circular arguments, you'll just arrive at the same place that we started. So I'm going to suggest that we get the information out of them immediately. How long will it take PETROTRIN to give us this information? And the information is, on what basis was this figure of, because I can't accept what you said, Mr. Harewood, I cannot, that this information was not received from PETROTRIN and told to the Lashley Committee. I must assume that the Lashley Committee put this in here based on information it got from PETROTRIN. I can't accept any other interpretation of that. So can we ask PETROTRIN within the shortest possible time to tell us where this budgeted expenditure for 2017 of 630 US million came from and what was the actual expenditure? How long will you take to give us that information?
You can have that available by the end of the week.
Fine, and on the end of the week is just 2 days from now.
Friday.
and on what in terms of categories? You don't have to go into fine details, but you could say on pipeline replacement, pipeline repair, tank replacement, tank repair, because that to me is what makes up the major element of asset integrity. It is repair of pipelines, repair of tanks and things like that. Yes, Mr. Ramdin, you go ahead.
I want to ask one question. You're the president of PETROTRIN. As the president of PETROTRIN, do you consider that PETROTRIN has the ability, as we speak, or in fiscal 2017, to spend $630 million US on asset integrity?
I can tell you that our budgeting did not include $630 million US on asset integrity last year.
That is not the answer to the question I'm asking. I'm asking you, as the president of PETROTRIN, does PETROTRIN, or did PETROTRIN in 2017 have the ability financially to spend $630 million US on asset integrity?
In one fiscal year, no.
That would then lead to one more question. Sorry, Mr. Young. One more question. So that on the face of it, what was told to the Lashley Committee, borrowing from the words of the chairman, Minister Imbert, couldn't be correct. It couldn't be.
All right.
All right.
If I may, Mr. Chair, through you. The first thing on taking on that point that Senator Ramdin was raising, I think the first thing that needs to be ascertained is where the figure came from. All right? Yes, Mr. Espin.
Chairman, I wonder if I could make a restatement that had been made earlier on. When the Lashley Committee was trying to put together this report, we were clear in our minds that nobody could sit here in the building next door and over a period of 7 meetings come up with a whole bunch of recommendations that will take PETROTRIN out of its present predicament. And so the report was clearly about the fact that governance and certain other things were the principal focus of the committee before we got down into what was the nitty-gritty. Obviously, this report was put together from a number of other reports. So I suspect that there is clearly some misunderstanding that went on in this whole thing.
All right, if I may, Mr. Chair. And taking on that point now, Mr. Espinay, this Lashley report was produced in June 2017. We're now in January 2018. Senator Ramdin a short while ago reminded the country that on the last occasion, PETROTRIN told us at this committee that you all were in the process of looking at PETROTRIN. This board's tenure began in October of last year or September of last year?
September.
So September of last year. Can you now tell us what is it that the board, this new board, has done now from September last year to now, and then also tell the country what it is that you all, what are your findings, if you all have made findings with respect to PETROTRIN, and what are the proposals going forward with respect to PETROTRIN?
Chair, through you, I'd like to answer that the board, when it came into office, decided that it needed to understand PETROTRIN much more clearly than it had in the past. And so we engaged a number of experts to come in and help us to understand what were the assets of PETROTRIN. Having gone through an exercise of determining the capability of the assets of PETROTRIN, we then, since our mandate was to bring PETROTRIN back to viability and profitability, we then started to design, if you want, or define how we are going to take the assets that we had and get them there. That process meant that we have determined that there are certain assets in our existence which were separated into two directions or into two operational characteristics. One was refining and marketing, and the other one was our exploration and production. We determined that both of these sets of assets were capable of being viable, albeit the refining and marketing was much more difficult than that of E&P. The difficulty arose because the cost structure of both of the organizations needed to be brought into what is a competitive level in order to sustain the both operations. Having come to that conclusion and having been reinforced with information from the experts, the board then made a presentation to a number of government ministers as the shareholders, and having done that, they presented to them the options and what was our intention in terms of trying to bring the cost down. Evidently, in bringing the cost down, there are a number of things that have to be done that engage all of the stakeholders. So the board went about engaging stakeholders in the process of letting them understand that we are embarking on a program of bringing this group of assets into viability. We met with the union, we met with members of the management of the company, a wide section of the management of the company. This is an ongoing process because the union is also, we plan to meet with the union again for them to make their presentation. We presented to them the information, the findings that was there in each case. So there has been one message that has been presented to everybody. Well, the message was the fact that a number of these assets are being operated in a manner that we need to change because their work practices, the method of operating, the cost structures are not consistent with companies in the same field of endeavor, and clearly these companies will not survive unless they were competitive.
Mr. Espinay, I want to just cut into the Vice Chairman and ask, with the greatest of respect to you, Mr. Espinay, I don't think that your answer is really what Mr. Young is getting at, unless I'm wrong. Mr. Young is specifically, we all know what the problem at PETROTRIN is. The costs are too high. I think what the Vice Chairman is asking is, what did you tell, or what was your plan that you told, whether it be the ministers of government, the OWTU, the members of management of the company, what were the specifics that you told them were your plans or suggestions or proposals, let me put it that way, to bring the cost down?
One of the things that the board engaged in was we brought in people who have benchmarked the company in relation to its competitors. And that benchmark is we intend to use that as a roadmap going forward, negotiating with the various stakeholders to bring the cost of it in line with competition. So that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
It doesn't, Mr. Espinay, because with the greatest of respect again.
Or would you like to know specifically whether or not we will take one truck from here and move it there?
No, let me put it this way.
Please.
Is it not correct that the cost of labor at PETROTRIN is extremely high?
There are lots of things that are not only labor, there are lots of things, the practices are also wrong.
And all right, so is it that in the proposals that you made to the OWTU, to the members of management, to the government and the ministers that you met with, what were the ways that you told them that we are going to make PETROTRIN more competitive by, one, bringing the cost down?
We engaged them, and our proposal to them has been, because they have said to us, we would like to make a presentation to you. And in the process, we have given them an agreement that we will meet with them next Monday. And after their presentation, we will then bring together a team made up of theirs, ours, and with people who have been experts, who are experts in the field, to help us to bring the numbers in line with what is competitive.
I can also, I think we're touching on the area of operational expenses, which to a large extent has been in the public domain and it's reflected in the lastly report. in terms of reducing the cost, the operational cost, there are some issues there with respect to things like overtime, things like flaring, and so on. I mean, that may be going on in the nitty-gritties, but what is PETROTRIN doing about reducing that overall operating costs, operating expenses?
Minister, you are undoubtedly very familiar with the fact that all of these things they're part of agreements that are signed and registered, and part of the culture of the system is that, and Mr. Ramdin is very familiar with it, is the legal process that emanates from all of any attempt to change these as a one-sided arrangement. Clearly, it involves engagement of all of the participants in the process, and there's going to be a process that you have to go through. That is, we're legally bound to do that. But let me point to you that all of these, the commitment of the board is to bring the cost in line. I can't tell you that it's going to be that we'll score 10 on one and 9 on the other. There are a huge bunch of items that make up your cost. Contractors make up cost. The purchase of things, your rental of equipment, people, for sure. Overtime is one.
Mr. Espini, let me stop you there on the overtime point and ask you some questions, if I may. PETROTRIN is owned by the state, correct?
It is.
So that means that every citizen of Trinidad and Tobago has a stake in PETROTRIN. And this board has been put in place to take policy decisions with a mandate to assess PETROTRIN and to see what can be done with PETROTRIN to take an albatross off of the necks of citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Is that fair?
I would think based on the losses over the last couple of years, yes, certainly.
Over time. You just told, well, this committee, in answer to my colleague, Senator Ramdin, and my colleague, the Minister of National Security, that there are a number of agreements in place to govern your relationship with the workforce at PETROTRIN. That's your collective agreements with OWTU, correct?
That's right.
And in those agreements, we as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago have heard certain things. One of the things, and I stop you on the point of overtime, we have heard, and I'm seeking some sort of clarification on here today, because I think the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to know what it is taxpayers deal with when it comes to PETROTRIN. You all have offshore operations at Trinmar, correct?
We do.
My understanding of what exists in this collective agreement is it's an 8-hour work day for a worker who works offshore. Is that correct?
I would pass on to one of the people who can give you the specific of that, but certainly that is so.
I would like whoever is going to answer this question to please tell Trinidad and Tobago what goes on with the payment of a worker offshore in Trinmar and the price that we, the taxpayers, pay for that work on a daily basis, according to the collective agreement. I think it's important that we know that, because we've been hearing things, and I want confirmation as to the specifics of what that costs a taxpayer on a daily basis.
Minister, let me begin by saying that the operations at our marine operations in Trinmar is run via operations, which is run on a shift basis, which is a 3-shift system, an 8-hour shift system. It's also maintained, if you will, via daylight operations. And the actual, what is agreed within the collective agreement allows for the payment of base salaries and enhancements, if you will, based on conditions and time of work and whether people work overtime hours, etc.
Mr. Harewood, you're speaking truthfully, but you're speaking in a language that I on the street don't understand. Are you going to break it down, or shall I help?
I was going to hand over to the VPHR to give you any specifics around that. I just want to set that context.
Thank you.
Sorry, afternoon, Minister. With respect to the Trinmar operations, there are traveling times, fixed traveling times, depending on the platforms. There are platforms in the north, platforms in the east, platforms in the south. They all have their own boat traveling times. And in addition to the 8 hours, there is a straight time attached for traveling time to and from the platform.
Again, that's French to even
It's,
me,
it's-
who've been familiar with collective agreements. Let me break it down. I'm a worker working on a platform that takes 2 hours from the time I arrive at wherever it is I'm supposed to reach to take a vessel, the jetty, thank you, and I'm supposed to travel out to a platform. When does my work time start? Is it when I arrive at the jetty, my shift? The 8-hour shift you all have referred to is when I arrive at the jetty to be transported?
No, the time from the jetty to the platform is paid as straight time.
It's paid as straight time?
Yes, as traveling time.
So that's travel time?
Yes.
So when I
and
get
back.
out to the platform, is that when my 8 hours start?
Yes, you have 8 hours on the platform.
And then when I leave the platform, because I have to leave the platform to get back, do I leave straight away at the end of my 8-hour shift?
Generally, sometimes you have overtime. If there's overtime, then there's overtime on the platform. But generally there is a shift system, so they will
Well,
leave
we understand
at
the
end.
shift system is an 8-hour shift system. I arrive at a jetty. It takes me 2 hours to travel out, so I'm paid travel for that. I arrive on the jetty now. I have an 8-hour work shift. On the platform, sorry, from the jetty to the platform, 2 hours travel time. On the platform, 8 hours work time. To leave the platform, to come back to the jetty is another 2 hours. My understanding is I don't leave the jetty, I don't leave the platform immediately at the end of my shift. But when my shift ends at that 8-hour mark, I am immediately now being paid overtime. Is that true? At the end of your 8-hour shift, overtime kicks in?
Yes.
And so the 2 hours to get back to the jetty to land is overtime, or that's travel?
No, that's travel time.
That's travel time.
Yes, and it's
But
a maximum 1 hour.
Is what?
At maximum is an hour. It varies between half an hour and 1 hour for traveling
The
time.
travel
One way.
time?
Yes,
So
one way.
it doesn't take 2 hours to get to the platform?
No.
All right. And then what happens is whilst I'm waiting on the platform, because invariably you have to wait for the boat that is coming out to drop off the next shift, there's an overlap of time. And that is the overtime payments made there, yes?
You may have overtime, yes.
But you're saying they may have, so that doesn't happen often.
It happens, but not all the
Okay,
time.
let me ask this question. You are in charge, you are the vice president in charge of HR or operations, what is it?
I'm human resource and corporate services.
All right. On payroll falls under you,
No, it's under finance.
but the collective agreements re-overtime you're familiar with.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Who can answer the question for what is the overtime bill of PETROTRIN on, say, a monthly or on an annual basis? What is the overtime bill? And then compared to what is the normal salary, flat salary, or whatever you call it?
It's about $22 million a month for overtime
$22 million a month for overtime?
for the entire company.
And what is the flat salary?
And the salary for the year is about $2 billion. So it's
$2 billion?
Yes.
So salaries for the year, $2 billion, but does that include overtime?
Yes, which includes
All right,
overtime.
but what I'm trying to find out is the comparison between overtime, so in other words, the ratio of your $2 billion salary a year, how much of that is overtime? Is it what you just said, 22? Is it 22 by 12, which is what, about 150, 160
Yes.
million?
Yes, that's correct.
300, 12, yeah, sorry. Finance.
So it approximates about 18%.
As to how much, sorry?
About 18%.
So 18%. So near to 20% of our salary bill at the end of the year is overtime. All right, sorry, Mr. Espina, I
Let me come in here
interrupted
now.
there.
Mr. Is it Derek? Is the
Yes, sir. Yes, it is.
Mr. Derek, you were saying something there and then the terminology changed. Let me just see if I could understand. You said when the person is traveling from the jetty to the rig, it's straight time?
Yes, it is.
So that's regular pay?
Yes, it's the hour, between half an hour and 1 hour pay,
Right, so
straight time for traveling.
It's not travel time or anything like that. They are being paid their regular salary and allowances during that, let's use the hour. During that hour from the jetty to the rig, they're being paid as if they were working. Straight time.
Yes.
And then they get paid 8 hours straight time?
Yes.
And then they get paid another hour straight time? If they do no overtime?
Yes, if they do
So they get, so somebody on an 8-hour shift is actually paid for 10 hours?
Yes, yeah.
I just wanted to clear that up.
If no.
Out, yeah, if there's. Kind of going a little off course here, because if you go to the Lashley report, and let me see if I can expand on the question asked by Minister Young. If we look at page 27, 28, and 29 of the Lashley report, in particular page 29, item 3, operations, and I just want to read a sentence. Currently, PetroTrin's cash flow is tight. Its working capital eroded. Margins are negative. Salaries are estimated at 50% of operating cost, and the company has an over-leveraged system. Then it goes on, based on the Solomon Consultants report, this estimate is too high against any benchmark. Could you tell us what the company plans to do about that? Because there's a definitive statement here in the report, which I assume is correct, that this estimate, and I assume it's the salaries at 50% of operating cost, because that's the only estimate in the preceding paragraph, is too high against any benchmark. Could you tell us what you plan to do about that, and what is the benchmark? Sure, yeah, sure.
For whoever the chair puts that question to be answered, let me ask Mr. Hayward, as the president, does he agree with that statement that of item number 3 in the operations that the chairman just read out?
Yes, member, we've been on record as saying that we have safety issues, asset integrity issues, people and competency issues, and we've also been on record as saying...
I didn't read that out. It's what I read out. Currently, PetroTrin's cash flow is tight, its working capital eroded, margins are negative,
Yes,
salaries
that
are
is correct.
estimated.
That is correct. We've been on
Fine.
record as saying that, yes.
So what is the benchmark? Because there's a statement here that some consulting firm called Solomon Consultants said this is too high against any benchmark. So what is the benchmark figure?
Chairman, the Solomon Associates was in fact brought back in at the time that we came into office as well to define in very specific detail where and how many do we have as being above, in every aspect of it, how are we above what is the standard? This exercise, they had completed the field work on it. They have done some workshops on it that was completed a couple of days ago, all right, last week. And they are now doing the final report, which is due to be sent to us by the middle of this month. So the program, and to answer specifically what are we doing about it, the board, as you know, has started the program of engaging the stakeholders to first of all let them understand the expanse of this problem, because there's, I mean, we are identifying labor in here, but this thing goes in every aspect of PetroTrin's activity. There are problems with your banks, there are problems with your, when I say problems, I mean
Mr.
that your...
Espini, just let me interrupt you. This is the Energy Affairs Subcommittee of the Parliament. We still have to interrogate BP, BG, EOG, Perenco, what's the next one? BHP, plus. We really want to finish the interrogation of PETROTRIN. Clearly, we need another meeting. What I would advise, just a suggestion, a very respectful suggestion, that if there's a statement such as this, that 50% of operating costs being paid to salaries is too high, what's the correct figure? So what should it be? 25%, 30%, 40%, 10%? What is the, somebody must know. Somebody in this group here must know what is the standard international benchmark for salaries in terms of operating costs. I would be shocked if nobody knows that. Especially Mr. Hayward, you must know. So could somebody answer, please? And I don't think it's fair to the board to just reach. Management must be able to.
Chairman, let me take that, because part of the presentation made by Solomon indicated that it is twice as much as it should be.
Good, so it's 20.
All right? So that gives you an indication. It's twice as much as it should
So
be.
it should be around 25%.
In terms of the cost. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well then, can we now go to, if salaries are twice as much as they should be using the international benchmark and all the other problems that you have, working capital eroded, margins negative, over-leveraged, plus salaries at twice what they should be, what is the plan? I deal with that.
I want to let you know, Chairman, that this board has been challenged with trying to find some sort of traction among the stakeholders in moving this thing forward, because time is of the essence, as you will appreciate. In a number of areas, these things have become very urgent, more than urgent. And so we have been up and down with all of our stakeholders, trying to at least convert their thinking to the understanding that PETROTRIN cannot exist in its present form. It cannot, and there may be a hangover that has lasted for a long period where people believe that the state will come and pick it up.
But Mr. Espine, the question that I think we want answered is this. You have been very gentle in terms of telling us that you have to meet with your stakeholders, and I understand that. That is part of the process. I'm not interested in the stakeholders at this moment, because the cabinet of this country put together a committee. The remit of that committee was to advise the government of this country as to how we move forward with PETROTRIN. I would have expected, and I fathom to think that I'm wrong, that committee, in your presentations to the government, would have told the government, listen, PETROTRIN is operating at twice their operating costs with respect to salaries than they should be. Forget about the union for the time being, because that is a matter that we'll come to. Forget about the union. When you went and made your presentation to the ministers or whoever it is PETROTRIN made their presentation to, it must have been part of your presentation to tell the government how is it that PETROTRIN proposes to reduce the operating costs in relation to salaries to half of what it is now. And I want to just preface what you're going to say by saying, the answer to that question cannot be we are going to meet with the stakeholders. Part of that process, that is the second part of the process, but the government wants to know how are you going to cut the cost of salaries by 50%.
Ramdeen, I assume you want to know too.
Well, of course.
So it's not just the government, the committee wants to know.
The entire Trinidad and Tobago wants to know.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. So it's not just the government.
Telling us that you're going to meet with the stakeholders, we know that. You have to do that. It can't be done without them. But what is it that you told the government you are going to do as a company to cut the operating cost in terms of salaries by 50%?
One of the, Senator Ramdeen, one of the things that was, through you, Chair, one of the things that was identified from very early on is that the company needed to be focused in its operational activities. And so one of the proposals that has come out of it is to separate the operational activities and to focus our management and employees in their specific operational activity rather than as we have them now as an integrated company where we have operational and a superstructure that manages it. That we see as being an opportunity to reduce the labor force, for sure. But there are going to be other things that have to be done, work practices and other things. I'm not sure if it is that we could convince people in bringing salary down that you may be able to work 4 days a week or 3 days a week rather than 5 if you want to keep numbers. These are all things that will have to come up in discussions. I can't give you what the finality is because these are things that are going to have to be discussed and come to some understanding of how it could be done.
But Mr. Espini, I understand that, and that's why I'm saying it is a process by which you have to balance both sides. You have to balance the PETROTRIN side with the stakeholder side. All I'm asking you is, from PETROTRIN's point of view, what are you going to the stakeholders and tell them?
We have to bring the price down. We're going to have to bring down the cost of our operation.
Right, and how are we going to do that? Are we going to reduce the labor force? Are we going to make people work 5 days instead of 7 days?
That is part of a negotiated process because I think that there are about 6 ways to skin the cat. I mean, I don't know. All right?
Esme, before we go any further, I think we'll go till about 4:30. Is that okay with the committee or you want to go shorter or later? You go at 4:30? Okay. So we'll go for another 20 minutes. Can PETROTRIN put together a PowerPoint presentation for this committee on the way forward, which would be broadcast live? I'm just letting you know that if you do such a thing, it will be broadcast live. Can you do that? Because I get the impression that you have already made a presentation to the trade union, unless I'm wrong. I got that impression. So can PETROTRIN do this?
Before you answer that, Mr. Espin, what I envisage, adding to what the chair has said, is you have to tell, and it's for the committee, but this committee is representing the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So what we need is, what I would like to suggest is a presentation that starts off by telling Trinidad and Tobago what is the state of PETROTRIN with some level of particularity. Because I heard Senator Ramdeen say, we all know is a burning platform or whatever is the phrase that is used in the report. But I think the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to have some idea as to what it is you're really dealing with, and then take up where the chairman has put it. What is the board's proposal for dealing with that going forward?
Chair and Minister Young, I with all due respect, I want to say that we at a board level are mindful of the fact of the friction that we could cause with a number of things that it becomes counterproductive to the process that we're in. And I'm not against, in fact, we have been making a lot of public statements that clearly indicate things, but these have to be chosen in such a framework that it does not aggravate some one of our stakeholders that is, for example, we have been speaking to the bondholders, and we will be speaking to the rest of our bankers. And all of these are sensitive things. Even the terminology that we oftentimes are using about restructuring has a legal connotation in the financial world. So we have to be careful that that is not a phrase that we would want to use at all, a word that we would want to use, and so on and so on. So I'm saying to you, I appreciate the public's need to understand it, and I appreciate, I could only say I appreciate the emotions that surround the energy sector. But I am saying that the board has been very cautious about being pushed into a position that creates for us a bigger problem in moving as quickly as we'd like to do. Sometimes the public posturing of it puts people into a predicament that they dig their heels in more than they're willing to do. So while we are prepared to make some presentation to the public, which we can bring to this, I just want to caution against it being any expectation whereby all of the issues of PETROTRIN are going to be kind of laid bare for the
That's
country
fair,
to know.
Mr. Espinay, but we still would like you to prepare a short presentation so everyone can get a better understanding of the issues and the challenges and possible solutions. So how long will it take you to prepare that?
Chair, I'm sure that by the end of next week we could have
So you could
something.
have it ready for the next time we meet with you?
Certainly.
All right, and I mean, you know, you use your judgment. The way these committees work, if members of the committee are not satisfied with the answers that they get or the information they receive, they will ask you again. So I just want to let you know. But
No,
use your judgment.
I appreciate that.
I fully understand what you said about saying things that might create, the end might be worse than the beginning, would create a problem. I totally understand it. I expect you to use your judgment in that and your discretion. But we would still like you to prepare a presentation for the next meeting, a PowerPoint, to let the members of the committee know and the public by extension through the broadcast, what are we facing in terms of PETROTRIN and what needs to be done to solve the problem, bearing in mind your issues with sensitive matters and, matters that might create friction, and to use your word. Okay?
Well, I thank you very much, Chairman. I appreciate that leeway, but I want to give the assurance to the committee that this board is totally committed to doing it, and it is a challenge of unbelievable proportions, as you could appreciate. I mean, I'm sure all of you all know that. You've seen what is the posture, and you've seen how fluid it is and how the dimension of it keeps changing and morphing. So that all I'm saying is that this is not going to be an easy challenge, and I hope that everybody has their seatbelts on.
No, we understand. All right. Could we now move on to... Yes, no problem, Senator Randy. Could we now move on to some other topics, please? Oh, sure.
Mr. Espinay, while I want to agree with the chairman and what you said, and while I understand, because of the field that I operate in as well, the issues of what can happen, and I think we should be open to the public. This is going to be broadcast live. The purpose of this is to inform the public. Every stakeholder in this process has to understand something, Mr. Espinay. The government has said to the country over and over that we must tighten our belts, and PETROTRIN is a real problem for this country. Forget about the government, for this country. And why it is a problem? It is because where you have finite resources and you find yourselves in a position where your revenue has fallen by 90%, you cannot be spending money on PETROTRIN that could be spent on other things and on other parts of the country that are deemed to be more important. And while I understand we are playing with words in terms of saying the OWTU can strike tomorrow if they hear that people are going to be laid off, the facts of the matter are, as a committee, we have a responsibility to discharge. And I would like the chairman to consider that if a report or a PowerPoint presentation is going to be made, I don't think that it would be a proper discharge of our responsibility as a committee for PETROTRIN to determine what should be put into the public domain and what ought not to be put in the public domain. If it is that in the discharge of our responsibility to the people, that is a decision that we ought properly to make. And if that presentation has to be made to lay bare what the facts are, it can be done in a particular way before it is put into the public domain for the committee to determine these are the things that the people of Trinidad and Tobago need to know, and these are the things that they ought not to know as a matter of confidentiality and protecting the interests of PETROTRIN and third parties. But it cannot be that we can continue. Like you said, everybody should put on their seatbelts and get ready to understand what is happening with PETROTRIN. But at the end of the day, the normal man on the street whose taxes pay and run PETROTRIN. PETROTRIN is, as you would understand, Mr. Espinay, you said it on the last occasion, PETROTRIN cannot be run like a private organization, because at the end of the day, it's not private money that is running PETROTRIN. It is the people of Trinidad and Tobago and their money that is running PETROTRIN. So at the end of the day, if a presentation has to be made of that magnitude so that people must understand what is happening, when the government takes decisions, they will understand why those decisions are being taken. I think that we should get the full picture, and we should be a part of that decision-making process.
Are you proposing that we have an in-camera presentation first?
Well, I would like for us to see what the facts
So
are.
that would be an in-camera
In-camera, of course,
presentation
in-camera.
first.
And then we
And
determine
then we
together with
determine
PETROTRIN.
what can be revealed
That
to
is
the
my
public.
proposal.
That is a matter for, not for this public broadcast. That's a matter for us
Of
as a
course.
committee.
And then-
So, Mr. Espine, we will get back to you on whether it will be a two-stage process, a presentation to the committee in camera, private, and then another presentation to the public that contains information that can be publicized, or whether we go straight with one presentation. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay,
And the committee
Mr.
will
Chair,
discuss that in camera.
Chair, let me just say that there was no intention to keep hidden from anybody or anything. And so let me just, it was only a caution that I made so that people's expectations come with the understanding that by the presentation we can make to you can fully disclose the state of PetroTrin. There's no reason why it couldn't.
Fine. So we will be in touch with you.
Good.
Okay. After we'll have a meeting after this in camera, and we'll let you know whether we want two or one presentation from you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there other matters in the 10 minutes remaining? Are there other matters members want to bring up? Feel free.
I might require more than 10 minutes, but I'll stop at the end of 10 minutes. And
I was willing to stay until midnight, but I saw my other colleagues.
I won't
I
direct.
think Mr. Ramdeen has a case to do, so go ahead.
So I'll direct it to the chairman, unless he is guided otherwise. I want to get back to the last report that was delivered in June 2017. And it has to do with management and government issues. And I have a few questions to ask coming out of the governance and management issues. Recently, there has been issues regarding possible false reporting of the amount of oil being sent to PetroTrin by certain companies. How does PetroTrin ensure that the amount of oil transported from a field to the refinery is accurate, as well as the quality of this crude? I have several questions along this line, so I don't know if you want me to pose all my questions or one by one.
Could I just stop you all a second one? Mr. Lee, could you refine or perfect that question? What are you really asking? How does PetroTrin determine how much oil moves from one part of its operations to another part?
Coming out from the operators.
Okay, so the question is, how does PetroTrin determine how much oil is produced and then
From the field to the
transported
and the quality of the product.
Mr. Lee, I will certainly pass it on to the E&P people who will better be able to explain it. But it is like any other operation in any other company. One has what is controls over the movement of its materials from one part of the company to the other, and it is measured. But I'll pass it on if you want the specific details in terms of the type of equipment used at each aspect. I'll pass it on.
Well, Mr. Espine, Chairman, it comes out of the false reporting that is alleged to have taken place over the last few months. There has been some false reporting that has been out in the media, and we are asking, how that happened, and if it happened, what's the process of ensuring that the production that comes out from your field operators is measured properly, and the quality of that product is what is the quality that you expect to receive.
Mr. Lee, I know that this has been going on for decades, so let me put it on to the President, who will certainly be able to take you through or pass you on to the production people.
Through you, Chairman, if I may answer on that question. In respect of I believe you termed it false reporting that is in the media recently, PetroTrin is unable to comment on any issues in respect of that. That is a matter that is sub judice, and we are unable to comment.
Let me come in here, please. Let's talk about it hypothetically or in general terms, therefore. Let's not deal with a specific incident.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Let's change the question to dealing with a specific matter to a question, general question. How does PetroTrin measure oil that is produced in one of its fields or wherever, and then transported, stored, collected, and then received at its ultimate destination, which I'm told is Point of Pear. How does PETROTRIN do that, hypothetically? Sorry. All right. Sorry, not hypothetically. How does PETROTRIN determine the quantity of oil produced in its fields, the quantity of oil transported, and the quantity of oil received at Point of Pear?
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, let me just take that if I can. The PETROTRIN, as you know, operates primarily through two various divisions of our business, two core divisions, one being the upstream division and the downstream division. We produce crude oil on both our land operations as well as in our marine operations. And that crude oil that we produce is sent to our refinery for processing. In moving the crude from our fields or producing fields to the refinery, we do it through a number of tank farms and pipelines, and then they go to in-transit tank farms, if you will, where we collate from what we call our western district and our eastern district, and then we bring that to our Point of Pear refinery. In areas where we are doing the production ourselves, we will bring the crude from the various wells that are collated through various gathering stations, tank farms, etc., to a common tank farm area where we measure the volume of crude that is being received from those fields, and then we pump that crude to the refinery and we measure the volume we pump. We take a measurement of the volume received, and we do a reconciliation process against what was pumped against what is received. That is the ongoing process that occurs. In our land operations, we have a number of third-party operators who are also part of our production in those areas, and they produce crude into our land operations, and at the point that they transfer the crude they produce into our land operations, we also measure the quantity of crude that is received and the quality of crude via sampling and lab testing to verify the water content, among other things. And that is also pumped into our Point of Pear refinery and also measured and reconciled on an ongoing basis.
Follow-up question. To the chairman, it has been reported in the media that there has been some false reporting of oil received by PETROTRIN. Is that a fair statement? Coming out of the internal reports or even the reports done by external auditors? It has been reported.
Mr. Lee, through you, Chairman, I would like to again go through the legal people, Senator Ramdin and Minister Young will know.
Let me assist you here. Let me assist the committee as well. The President told us about the movement, but the question was also about the measurement. So we understand how it moves. It comes out of a well. It goes into a pipeline, then it goes to a tank, then it goes to a bigger tank, and then it goes through a series of pipelines to another tank, and it arrives in Point of Pear. How do you measure how much oil comes out of the well, how much oil goes to the first collector tank, how much oil goes to the big collector tank, how much oil goes from that big tank to the tanks in Point of Pear? How do you measure that?
With oil provided by third parties.
Yes, with oil not produced by PETROTRIN.
And the quality.
I can answer now, right? Again, the process by which we measure the crude we receive is a process that is in accordance with the API standards, and it is basically made up of tank gauging, which is fundamentally a manually operated system. In some cases, there is some instrumentation.
Right, Mr. Hayward, excuse me. Being an engineer, I might understand what you mean, and I use the word might. But not everybody in this room is an engineer. Explain what tank gauging means.
So again, and again in a very general way, tank gauging means that we measure how we take a measurement of the height of the fluid in the tank.
What do you use to take that measurement?
We actually do manual measurements. We actually do a dip of the tank.
With
to
what?
Determine a dipstick.
Okay.
So it's called tank
That is
gauging.
what I would like you to say.
So we do tank
So you use a
gauging.
dipstick, and you put the dipstick in the tank, and you measure the level. That's what.
Chairman, you seem to have a better understanding
That's
of
why I
the
said
process
I
than
might understand because I'm an engineer. Not everybody here. So.
Well, it's fundamentally a manual system. So I'm suggesting to you that what we do is that we measure the height of the fluid in the tank.
Using a dipstick.
Using a dipstick in some cases, and then we
And you said some cases, in
because
other
in
cases.
some cases we may have instrumentation and
like
we may
what,
also,
a gauge?
We may have a automatic gauging system. We may have handheld gauges that can be used on tanks that can tell you what the height of the tank is and the
What,
fluid in
using
the tank.
sonar? How does
Using
that
infrared
work?
technology.
Infrared. Okay, well, hold on. What percentage
Not a
of
high
your
percentage.
measurements are done using dipsticks?
Most of our measurements are done using manual systems, which is dipsticks.
So the vast majority of the measurement is done using a
Yes.
dipstick. This is in the first tank, in the line. You go from well, pipeline, tank, 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 tank. In the first tank is a dipstick.
Let me let the VP ENP take that detail, Chairman, because
should
you
have
want to
done-
carry me down
you
a
should
rabbit
have done
hole
that
maybe
long
he's
time.
better able.
Okay, so the majority, as we've said, is even in the first tank from a well into a tank, it's done by a manual, a dipstick. In some areas, very few, we have what we call multi-phase metering, and we have that in the offshore operations, where that is done via later technology. But all the systems from the well testing into the secondary gathering stations, into the final tank farm, the majority, over 98%, would have been done being dipstick, manual, in order to get the water cut, to understand what is clear oil and what is water. There's a tape that distinguishes between oil and water, and that is measured. There are temperature calculations that are done.
You're going
to
a bit
underst-
too fast.
Okay.
You're going a bit too fast. Now you're getting into the realm of quality.
Yes.
Although it's linked to quantity. So you put a dipstick into the first tank and you measure the amount of oil.
Yes.
And is that repeated in every other tank all the way down to point of pair?
Yes, so basically that is done. So from the well, you go to a collection system, and of course these systems, you're able to rotate one well, another well, etc. So for the well test, typically it's a 24-hour test to be able to understand what the rate of the well is actually doing. And there's in-transit tanks that you do the same thing till you get to the two main gathering tank farms, which is in Barrackpore and in Bernstein, and from there it is pumped to the point of refinery, which
Right, so
that is also done
so
at the refinery also.
A dipstick method is used from the well all the way to the main collector tank.
That's
tanks.
correct, yes.
When
The
it's
majority.
pumped from there to PETROTRIN, it goes into holding tanks or something like that?
Yes.
How do you measure what's in there?
Via manual gauging,
Same
dipstick also.
dipstick.
Yes. And that's the majority.
Right.
Maybe 2 installations are
Okay.
what you call LACT,
Fine.
automatic custody
Is that
transfer.
best practice?
It is an accepted practice, but there are obviously there are improvements to that via technology, there's some that have the automatic custody transfer, which is all.
What's your name again, sir?
Stephen Hour.
Mr.
Hour.
Awa?
Yes.
Best practice is a term of art. Is that, let me help you, the best practice?
It's the well-recognized API standard. It is an API standard.
You're not answering my question. If PETROTRIN had the option to use an electronic gauge or some other electronic device or mechanical device that could measure the volume of oil in a tank, compared to the dipstick method, which is a human being holding a rod and sticking it in a tank, which is the better practice?
We will like to go to the electronic systems.
Well, I would have thought that would be self-evident. So now let's go to quality.
But just Chair, just one qualifier on that is that these systems also have to have rigorous maintenance procedures in terms of calibrations
Yeah,
and so
but you
on.
have to calibrate the human too. You know, the human can make mistakes just like the mechanical device. So let's go to quality now. How do you determine what is oil and what is water?
Okay, so there's a tape that is lowered into the tank also that is able, the material in the tape is able to change based on the interface with water and crude.
So you have to wait for it to settle then?
Yes.
So you can't measure immediately?
That's right.
You have to wait for the water to separate from the oil?
That's right.
And float?
Yes,
Well,
so
the oil will float?
Correct.
I see. And how do you measure the quality of the oil itself?
Okay, so that is sent to our lab. So each sample that is, there's something that you call a thief that you send into the tank to be able to take a thief. You call it a thief. So at different intervals in the tank, you take basically at 3 levels, lower, middle, and top, and you take that.
A measuring device?
Yes, it's able to grab a sample in the tank, and you take that.
Obtains a sample of the oil?
Yes, but the oil field term is a thief.
Yeah, that's okay.
Maybe not appropriate here, but
that's all right. That's all right. You could
so
use
and then
whatever
that is
term you
taken to the lab to do the appropriate testing.
Okay. Is that sampling done in the first tank, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, or is it done only in certain tanks?
That is basically done in the tank farm areas. So
the collectors.
The main collectors, correct.
So it is not. So if oil is coming from different areas, different wells, different fields, different producers, and you're sampling in the collector, how do you know, yes, whose is which, and what was the quality of the oil in the well?
Okay, so that is done basically in the first tank, where we do the well testing, the individual well testing, where that is done. So you get a characterization well by well, the water cut.
All right, but I had just asked you that, and I got the impression, perhaps I was wrong, that you said that you test in the collector tank, not in the first tank.
Okay, that just to be clear, that is for the purposes of custody transfer. There's a clear differentiation for well testing versus custody transfer. Again, for the well testing, it's really a lot to do with reservoir management.
So you're testing the oil as it comes out of the well or as it goes into the first tank?
Well, for basically the well test tank, that's what you want to do for an individual
That's what
well.
I mean by the first tank.
So you clearly understand the properties of wells with respect to reservoir management.
So you test the quality of the oil that comes out of the particular well in the well test tank.
Yes.
And then you test it again in the collector tank. But that's when it comes from everyone.
That's correct.
All right.
Just from a measurement point of view now, you have different fields, different operators. All of their product is then piped to the collector's tank? Yes?
Yes, the 2 main stations are in
Right, in
Barrackpore
Barrackpore.
for the eastern, and the western is in Bernstein in Forest Reserve.
So then what you're relying on for each operator's, the accuracy of each operator's quantity is what you do at their wells, the testing of the tanks at their wells.
At their gathering stations via the dipstick, yes. So what we call a high gauge and a low gauge.
Because
Correct.
everything is then gathering in these collector tanks from
That's
various operators, various fields, etc.
That's correct.
That's the question. We kind of took over your question, so we can return to you.
Maybe Mr. Awa could answer this question. Are there any cases from farm operators where the crude or the quality is mixed with another commodity? Do you all have any cases where in layman terms, the quantity and the quality that the operators submit to PETROTRIN via the collector's tank, whatever you want to call it, the first tank, is suspect and is mixed with another type of substance? Do you all have any cases like that?
Remember, not that I'm aware of. That hasn't been brought to our attention.
Lee, you want to explain what you mean by that question?
I'm just asking a question, Chairman, that based on some information that I might have, that the quantity and the quality of the crude that is being sent to PETROTRIN by these farm operators are suspect and is not the quality that the PETROTRIN is expect to receive. It's mixed with another substance. And I'm asking, are there any cases of that, any fines or any cases that are suspect from farm operators in that respect? And Mr. Awa said no. Okay.
All right, so you haven't picked up any evidence of persons tampering with the I don't want to call it product, with the oil, and mixing it with something else that is of a lower value or, poor quality. You have not experienced that?
No, Chairman, we haven't experienced that at all.
Okay.
We haven't heard about that.
Issues with
to my
quantity.
knowledge.
Okay. 39, I think we can wrap up now. The next meeting will be, when is Carnival? What did you say? Don't meet before that? Well, we'll either meet you immediately before or immediately after Carnival. I will let you know. Okay? But at that meeting, we would like you to make the presentation. We will tell you today whether it will be an in-camera presentation first, followed by a public presentation, or whether it will be a straight public presentation. I want to thank the members of the board and management of PETROTRIN for coming. And we do want to get on to BP and BG and so on. So, we're just letting you know what is going to happen if members are not satisfied with the answers. Then we'll be with you for a little longer than you might anticipate. Okay? But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman and members.